Welcome everybody. I will go ahead and call to order this meeting of the Climate Action Resilience Committee of Bloomington County Council. It is Tuesday, October 18th, 2022, 6:01 p.m. I'll go ahead and just let committee members say their name and announce themselves by way of roll call. So Matt Flaherty, chair of the committee.
Ron Smith,
Dave Rowell,
member of the committee. Yeah.
Dave Rowell, committee member.
Isabel Smith.
Great. So we have full attendance. We also are joined by staff from Economic Sustainable Development, Director Alex Crowley and Assistant Director for Sustainability, Lauren Clemens, as well as some others. But and also I'll note that the chair of the Commission on Sustainability, Joseph Winning, is here to listen in and as we contribute as well. So with that, we have really two main agenda items for tonight. I'll go ahead and review the agenda. We've got an update on the Climate Action Plan from Lauren Clemens, Assistant Director of Sustainability. A note for members and members of the public that we will have a presentation at tomorrow night's regular session of the Common Council as well, the Climate Action Plan update. But one of the purposes of that we agreed on earlier this year, late last year, was to use this committee to have opportunity for a little bit more of a conversation, back and forth dialogue around those updates from Lauren. So we'll do that. Next on the agenda is planning for public hearings on gas-powered lawn, garden equipment and off-road equipment. This is a strategy within our climate action plan. We'll talk about some next steps for how to address that. Next, we'll consider committee member issues or priorities other than those already discussed. Then we'll talk about any scheduling of public hearings and our next meetings of the committee for our sort of quarterly schedule, if we'd like to try to stick to that or maintain that, and then we'll adjourn. So we set an end time of 7:30. It may not take that long, but we will try to stick to that as a maximum in any case. Happy to answer questions regarding it, but if not, move on to the first agenda item, update on the climate action plan from Lauren Clemens.
Sure, and I did want to note it's the same presentation tonight as tomorrow night, so I think we'll go through the 10 minutes and then this will be an opportunity for longer questions just in case someone's joining tonight's meeting and then not tomorrow's night. So go to share. Okay. Good evening, council members and members of the public. I am Lauren Clemens and I serve as the Assistant Director of Sustainability in the Economic and Sustainable Development Department. Tonight, I will provide a brief summary of the latest Climate and Sustainability Progress Report submitted to Council last Friday. The public can find a copy of this report posted in the Council packet for Wednesday and also on the city's website, along with past reports at bloomington.in.gov/sustainability. This evening's discussion will focus on progress towards implementing two plans that are currently active, the 2018 Sustainability Action Plan and the 2021 Climate Action Plan. I will provide an overview of the goals of both plans, a snapshot of the completed, in progress, and ongoing actions, and recent progress towards increasing capacity to implement climate and sustainability actions. The Climate and Sustainability Action Plans act as strategic guides for climate and sustainability implementation in Bloomington. The 2021 Climate Action Plan established long-term climate resilience vision and mitigation goals for Bloomington through 2050. Implementation of the Climate Action Plan strategies and actions is intended as a 10-year community-wide effort implemented in 3 phases until 2030. Implementation of the plan is currently underway for actions in phase 1. The 2018 Sustainability Action Plan represented the first formal sustainability planning effort for the city of Bloomington and strengthened existing sustainability initiatives by identifying and communicating strategic goals with an emphasis on climate change mitigation strategies. Implementation of this plan is active until the end of 2023. Bloomington's greenhouse gas emissions are predominantly generated by consumption of electricity and natural gas to heat and cool buildings across the community. In 2018, as listed, 1.3 million metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent were emitted in Bloomington. Between 2008 and 2018, emissions have dropped 16%, in part due to reduced emissions associated with energy production. Under a business as usual scenario, greenhouse gas emissions are projected to decrease an additional 9% by 2030 and 43% by 2050. Successful implementation of the actions and strategies in the climate action plan will be necessary to achieve the 321,000 metric tons of annual emissions reductions modeled as part of the CAP.
Should we hold our questions or
That's up to you. Sure.
it's be okay if I ask one?
It's okay with
Yeah.
Lauren then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're not on a timer right now.
Thank you. So I'm trying to understand why our emissions are projected to decrease an additional 9%. In a business as usual scenario.
Yeah, so there's expected to be increasing efficiency from water efficiency, water treatment, as we have newer buildings, they are projected to be more efficient, as well as like increased solar production across that period of time, and then other efficiencies. So with building stock continually getting updated, we'll have lower emissions per capita. But the rate is not quick enough to meet our climate goals unless we also implement CAP action.
So it's because of newer facilities in the continued solar production.
Yeah, predominantly.
Thank you.
And the grid itself as well, right?
Yeah.
Renewable energy on the grid.
Grid efficiency. Yeah, I will also note, we've seen the grid switch to less coal and more natural gas, and that has also reduced emissions overall as well. Okay. So now we'll just do a quick overview by sector. If you look at the report, it's broken down across the different sectors, and you can look at each action and the designation of which progress status it is. So the report itself is only a glimpse of the overall effort underway across the community to address climate issues. Overall, the city and community are making significant progress to advance our sustainability and climate goals as defined by these two plans, and are prioritizing those actions that warrant the most urgent attention. The 2022 progress report to council designates progress towards individual actions as completed, underway, ongoing, not started, or inactive. Across the two plans in the 9 sectors represented, 112 actions are completed, underway, or ongoing, a significant achievement since the beginning of implementation 3 years ago, and during a global pandemic, which has posed a significant challenge. This graphic, which can also be found on page 3 of the report, provides a snapshot on the status of each action, can be found within the report text. Additional progress towards implementation of the actions will continue in upcoming years. I will now describe the efforts to increase internal and external implementation capacity, as well as the progress towards increasing funding support for climate action since my last report. Internal capacity refers to establishing the climate action plan as a priority to internal city operations through outreach, education, special projects, and city service delivery. Nearly all city departments were involved in the development of the CAP, and the majority of departments are now implementing the plan's actions, a truly collaborative effort. To realize community climate goals requires sustained efforts across all sectors, year over year, and throughout the next decade. A few key efforts led by the city to scale up momentum around climate action have positioned the city to significantly reduce the carbon impact of city operations. This progress represents a significant growth in internal capacity to implement the plan. City of Bloomington department directors and staff members have advanced significant progress towards implementation of the CAP, including significant fleet electrification efforts. Bloomington Transit recently received another $7 million grant for electric buses, and the board of directors adopted a goal to transition the bus fleet to 60% battery electric by the year 2030. This new grant award, coupled with existing federal funds, positions Bloomington Transit to add 16 battery electric buses to the current fleet of 39 buses by 2024. In recognition of the City of Bloomington Utilities' efforts to help residential customers address stormwater drainage concerns on their lots, the Residential Stormwater Grants Program received the 2022 Education and Outreach Award from the Indiana Association for Floodplain and Stormwater Management. This program is an innovative outreach effort that brings together many stakeholders while improving the city's stormwater system to build resilience to climate impacts. Active since 2019, this is an ongoing effort that mitigates flood hazards and impacts while increasing green infrastructure capacity. These efforts are among and in addition to the significant work advanced by other city departments in conjunction with partners and leaders in the community. City departments act as partners through outreach, education, and special projects across all of the sectors represented in the CAP, including in initiatives that were outlined throughout the course of budget presentations and in the mid-year 2022 city goal mid-year update. Many elements of the climate and sustainability action plans require new approaches, initiatives, or programs to support implementation. The climate action team convenes bi-monthly to discuss and advance actions of the CAP and discuss updates on city projects and initiatives in support of implementation. The work of this group is ongoing since 2019 and will continue in 2023. Advancing climate action goals relies on increasing support for the plan outcomes from community members, as well as additional coordination with jurisdictional, institutional, and organizational partners. Launched in fall 2022, the Zero in Bloomington website now serves as a centralized campaign to provide Bloomington residents with local customized recommendations to reduce household carbon emissions in support of the CAP. By creating a profile, residents can now learn about the benefits and incentives of climate action and receive insights about energy usage based on household characteristics, and the site dashboard tracks community progress towards carbon neutrality. Other notable advancements to grow partnerships with other institutional and organizational partners included co-hosting a regional climate convening this month, which brought together over 100 attendees from Bartholomew, Brown, and Monroe counties across the private, nonprofit, educational, government sectors. This convening was intended to kickstart collaboration across the region, and planning for follow-up activities with businesses and industrial users is underway to accelerate institutional commitments to climate action. Advancement of climate action is now supported by significant ongoing investments following the passage of the ED lit and bond funding in early 2022. ESD's 2022 budget proposal alone includes over $1.6 million in direct climate investments. The approved 2023 budget will also support numerous projects, programs, and initiatives to advance sustainability and climate action, both directly and indirectly. The dedication of this funding will accelerate and deepen the impact of existing programs, expand the scope of other programs piloted during the pandemic, and allow for additional investments in alternative transportation that would not have been possible prior to the dedication of both the ED lit and bond funds. Past climate efforts piloted under Recover Forward for the urban canopy, solar, energy efficiency, and composting efforts will continue to provide grants and other funding to community partners to implement climate projects. These local investments will be matched and amplified by recent federal investments, including the Infrastructure and Inflation Reduction Acts that represent transformational opportunities to both address the drivers of emissions and improve resiliency across Bloomington and Monroe County. To achieve Bloomington's vision of a carbon neutral and resilient community, businesses, industry, all levels of government, and residents must come together to reduce our collective carbon footprint and continue to advance climate action across all sectors. We all have a role to play in climate action and look forward to working together with council, county, nonprofit, private sectors, and with the community to support the short and long range implementation of both the sustainability and climate action plans. And then thank you for your time, and I welcome your questions.
Thank you, Lauren. I'll open it to community members for questions.
Also pull up the
I have a question about sequestration.
Sure.
And do we have a handle on a number? Do we track sequestration? Can we assign a number to the amount of carbon that we're sequestering through actions that we're undertaking?
I think our best estimate on carbon sequestration is based on our last tree canopy assessment. Aside from that, it would just be an estimate for other programs or on a tree by tree basis, but not for other programs.
Okay, I guess maybe to tease that apart a little bit, we're planting some new trees.
That's fair.
So those are novel efforts and new efforts. And then we have a tree canopy that's been established for decades or centuries. And that's sequestering carbon.
Mhm.
Can we have estimations of the carbon that is being extracted and sequestered in those? And, you know, it should be, I mean, there should be some sort of formula to say,
Yeah,
given this number of trees, you know, you could expect X amount of carbon to be
mhm. I think, and let me,
sequestered. And the same goes for prairie plantings, I guess, but that's not.
I think the best, maybe visual estimate that I've seen was based on our canopy assessment, and for the people that are joining via Zoom, I'll share this too. So Davy Tree has done a planning assessment. You can go to tree benefits and it will show you CO2 by tree type.
Okay,
So I think, and as we add trees, this is updated on an ongoing basis. So in terms of like the public tree canopy, I think we have a pretty good sense. But then there are some gaps in areas where people might be removing or adding private trees. And then in that case, we've been partnering with Canopy Bloomington or others to increase canopy gaps there.
yeah, I understand that this is a dynamic number.
Yeah.
Because people remove trees and plant and so forth, but can we get a number in the aggregate?
Yeah, I can look it up and
Okay,
send it to you all about what the basement is.
okay.
Yes.
Thanks.
Is this map linked somewhere?
Yeah, so I linked it on the sustainability page as well, but this was a urban forestry effort in conjunction with supporting our Tree City USA designation. So it's a visual page that kind of explains the assessment, which was and then it explains benefits of the canopy as well. So I think this is helpful in terms of covering different types of canopy resources.
So, first of all, you do a fantastic job. This is a really, really comprehensive and great, and I'm so impressed with all the metrics that you have. Well, I was thinking, the thing that comes out of my head is, how do we factor in IU's expression of carbon in our plan, or, and then the secondary question is, what part do they play in helping reduce those things?
Sure. So their impact is captured in our community-wide emissions inventory, and then they also on a regular basis are looking at the impact of their own operations. That's not broken out separately in the report, but I think like given the proportion of our land cover that is managed by IU, they are an important partner, and I know that they are in the process of working internally on a climate planning effort themselves as well. So I think that seeing where that goes and continuing to try to align with our community-wide goals will be an important partnership longer term.
In the city, well, do we look at it in a Monroe County way, or are we just looking at the city boundaries when we're having this kind of discussion?
I think to this point, we've mostly just looked at city boundaries, but I'm also on the County Environmental Commission, and we're looking at possibly trying to look at countywide like adaptation planning as well, because a lot of these are irrespective of boundaries. So if you have flooding in Bloomington, it's affecting Monroe County, vice versa, Bloomington, of course, is part of Monroe County. So I think some of the strategies that are in the climate action plan may be more applicable to Bloomington or more urbanized areas, but a lot of them are applicable.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And to that end, with thinking of it in a broader sense, maybe are we able to figure out what buildings or what actions on a large scale, because that's the only way I can think about it at this point, need the most mitigation? So like a big building or a big whatever, do we know which ones of those that are out there, Bloomington city sense or county sense, maybe some of our people, some of the things that we need to help with mitigation efforts.
Yeah, we don't have any like carbon intensity per square foot measures that we've done at this point, but I think in terms of like reaching out to building owners to participate in programs, we're looking at expanding the solar and energy efficiency program to also businesses for next year. So that would be an area where if someone owns a larger square footage building, typically they have a larger roof size, would be able to host a larger solar installation to offset their use. And then also have a larger potential reduction in electricity use from that. So the best way to estimate that would just to be look at like property records and see like what the general size of the building is and who owns it and try to partner with them voluntarily. Some cities have done benchmarking ordinances. So like if a building's over a certain size and there's mandatory energy reporting, Indianapolis started that pretty recently. So that could be something, Bloomington's never done that, but maybe longer term for larger buildings, that could be an action that this committee helps work on together.
Thank you, Ms. Clemens.
Yeah.
Fantastic. I really.
And on that last point, I mean, we charged that hill, not charged that hill. Thought about,
Instead of volley,
what's that?
instead of volley.
This is probably 4 or 5 years ago after I'd gotten here, and there was serious pushback, right? But I think we're in a different time right now. I think from there's a level of awareness and intensity and understanding and external pressures on particularly owners of larger buildings if they have investors and that sort of thing where it may not be a bad time to revisit that, and because that would certainly help to rather than just depending upon guesses.
Yeah,
Then you've got a sense of what's actually going on, and we can actually target support programs to help.
provide more data, and then if there's different areas or buildings or activities that are really doing not a great job of contributing to the carbon. Yeah,
But the key is to go with carrot and the stick, right? And so you don't want to just kind of beat on them. And but if there's a complementary program that actually provides either expertise and or incentive, support to help mitigate the problem, and that those two together.
There is an action in the CAP, I think it's in phase 1 to try to identify the top 50 buildings, which I think is what you're talking about in terms of size. And so that's part of like just making sure that we're thinking about the average square footage and the highest impact actions would include reaching out to those property owners.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
With the Indianapolis is benchmarking, and they've I'm trying to recall, they started with the voluntary program first, right?
Yeah, often.
And then also, did they get the Indianapolis Chamber on board ultimately, Chamber of Commerce? I know there was some,
I don't know.
a lot of discussion. I think they, if my memory is right on that. I think they did eventually give their support because it was such a long phase in timeline, and it's really just disclosure. It's not, New York City is moving forward on like you're gonna have to meet certain targets and things like that over time. But the discussion here has really been just about measuring and reporting, which in most cases will save folks money because they're going to identify the cost efficient investment of their own. So hopefully, with the right conversation and education around it, we can make some progress.
Yeah, I think there's been higher subscription, voluntary subscription in the program than we were expecting.
Yeah.
It's also easier now, I think, to model your energy use on Duke Energy than it was before they updated their billing software. So anyone can export their electricity use pretty easily. And I think that may also help with that piece of like data tracking.
So is Indianapolis now requiring disclosure?
It's voluntary.
Oh, it's,
Yeah.
But there's a trajectory, I think, where
Yeah.
eventually, it's like get it while we get it's good.
Well, and they got pretty significant buildings involved. I think that's part of it too, to understand that other people in your peer group are participating. So the field house and some other large buildings have a great interest in.
I had a few, but that's one.
go ahead.
You said go ahead.
Go ahead.
Oh, all right, thanks. First, just thank you. I really appreciate the the kind of comprehensive run through actions and their status. I know we've talked about that in the past meetings and trying to find like a holistic and comprehensive way to look at it and track progress over time. Is this also tracked in Excel spreadsheet or something? I would imagine.
Yeah, you can have it in Excel if you like.
Maybe so. That's, I don't want to create work for you, but if that's something
No.
you're already doing, I would consider it.
Well, I
Yeah,
think
that one.
like longer term, we're also gonna work with the climate action team, which you're sitting on, and look at opportunities to like make sure that some of the more qualitative measures are also tracked consistently
Mhm.
across individual actions.
Okay. Great. And then I had a question about inactive actions in particular.
Sure.
Can you just talk more about that?
Sure.
Okay.
Several of them that are marked as inactive were from the sustainability action plan, and that's predominantly related to the fact that when they were scheduled for implementation, no large events were happening. So there were a couple that were related to like holding a trade show or tours or things like that. And so I think progress hasn't been met for those. I wouldn't say that means that they couldn't be reevaluated, but action was moved forward with others that didn't require as much like in-person attendance.
Thanks. I'll stop there.
So, on several of these, well, first of all, this is a great report. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
I started reading it and I was like, okay, so I get the cap open and the snap open and here, and then I started reading, I was like, oh, I didn't even need that. It's all spelled out. It's wonderful. So on several of the goals, I think it's from the SAP.
Sure.
It said evaluate the development of a SMART goal for doing X, Y, or Z.
Mhm.
So if that's completed, does that mean you have developed a SMART goal, and where would we find said SMART goal?
I think there's a lot of instances of that, and that was also one of the things that was addressed by the climate action plan. So like one of them said evaluate the development of a renewable energy goal, and then during the process of creating the climate action plan, we created a specific metric that we were trying to reach with like solar deployment. So then those kind of got cross-listed and completed. If there was another specific instance that you're looking at.
Well, the first one I came across was SAP goal 2.2, increase the percentage of commercial and residential building using sustainable building certification programs and incentives. So it says evaluate this development of a SMART goal for increasing the use of sustainable building certification program for the development of the 2019 baseline. And that SMART is completed.
Mhm.
So does that mean there is, and that had to look up SMART goal, specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, time bound. So is that SMART goal in the CAP?
Yeah, and so there was also a couple in there that was like evaluate living building challenge. I think
Yeah.
there's been a lot more movement and LEED specifically as a standard across the community, as opposed to some of the other alternatives like living building challenge. So there's a goal about sustainable building certifications in the buildings and energy section of the CAP, and that's what it is. So there's some that are maybe like not quantitative in the sustainability action plan, and then we created a quantitative goal.
Okay. And then my other question, just in the same section, there's a reference to the Be Clear portal. So the Sustainable Development Incentive Program is tracked there, but I couldn't find it.
Yeah, I can, I know that planning was working on improving like visibility of current development petitions, and so I can put the link to that and I can send them to you.
Okay.
I don't know, but I'll check if it's linked to Be Clear, but there's a plan web page.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I can Be Clear, I looked up sustainable.
Oh,
Sure, only like 3 data sets.
yeah, I can follow them.
More questions?
Yeah, a couple more. One is as part of our cutting of electrical energy usage as a city, we're installing LEDs.
Mhm.
And I brought this up at the budget hearing.
Mhm.
And I don't think I've got an answer yet about. Do you happen to know what LEDs we're using for streetlights, for instance?
The specifications of it?
Yeah,
I can check, there, it's in phases, so I don't know if it's like identical across every streetlight project.
okay. The downside is it reduces insect populations, if it's in a blue wavelength, so I just want to make sure that we're installing the right wavelength.
Sure.
Easy enough, I think, to just correct it, if we're not getting there. My other question is about some of the goals,
Yeah.
and one of them is local food.
Yeah.
Progress tracking.
Sure.
And you know, I was disappointed in this last year's budget for a couple of reasons, but one of them was that we only allocated, I think, 27, 40 something.
In 22.
Yeah, 2023.
For,
Oh, for 20 for next week.
Yeah, next year, yeah. For those-
Well, there's 46 in the ED lib. And then which food access.
Okay,
for super.
And then we've got a certain amount in the we have 75 inside of the
For this year.
in the ESD. Some of it is listed in the ESD check box. I can look that up.
so you have 73. So
Let
what
me
is,
check that.
so what's in,
The lid.
yeah, which is being, was allocated to what department?
CFR.
Super.
Yeah,
For Jackson.
right. That was for researching food deserts, right, or something to do with food deserts.
Mhm.
Okay, in any case, such a small amount. I mean, why, aren't we going big on local food? I mean, this report's excellent, don't get me wrong, and I know that it's comparative to other cities, what they're doing in terms of reducing CO2 emissions that are emanating from the community. And a lot of things we can't track. So we can't track behavior. So somebody flies to Australia twice a year or whatever.
Mhm.
I mean, their carbon footprint's huge and it happened, I don't know, they live in Bloomington, I suppose. I don't know how you account for that. But imports, everything that is imported has a carbon footprint. We can't import substitute this, but we could import substitute food. So it seems to me a pretty easy way in which we could reduce carbon emissions is to target local food production in order to reduce import, for import substitution. And it pays off in other ways, of course, we talked about. So is it because, could you help me understand why this isn't as high a priority, it seems? I mean, is there something that I'm missing in terms of the application of these funds that you don't see it paying back? Or is it, I mean, is there sort of an activation energy that's required in order to get the payoff? I mean, how much have you thought about those sorts of things?
I think it's a question of capacity and partnerships. It's not unlike some other sections of the app that, I mean, I'll just use health and safety as a perfect example. Like we need to build relationships with other organizations across the community that are already working in this space. But I think there's also, in terms of the ED funding, like it will be ongoing. So just because there's one allocation this year doesn't mean that precludes anything different happening in the future. I think it's capacity to build programs around any of these actions as well. So I think the benefit of tracking progress over time is to see where we might not be moving as quickly in some areas, and then think about who's missing from that space in order to move that faster.
We made a pretty big investment too on the farm stop infrastructure, and that was that big, right? And I think it needs to have the effect that it will be having hopefully in the long term. We had someone on staff as far as USDA grant for 3 years, really helping to push some of the stuff forward, and that was great. That allowed us to do a lot more work on that very specific subcategory of work. When that resource goes away, right, then then as Lauren says, there's just a challenge of like, there's just only so much you can do. And so you have to start to prioritize. And Lauren's, been doing a lot of work on establishing programs. So there's been a lot of effort to stand up programs that are associated with ARPA and now lit. That's a huge lift. But once they're stood up, and it's not that they can operate without any management, but it's a lot less intensive to manage a program than it is to launch a program. So that could potentially allow us to reprioritize the future. For
Okay.
sector too.
Yeah, I think we're also looking at new funding opportunities as well, because between the Inflation Reduction Act and other new federal grant opportunities, that opens up possibilities that might not be possible in the past without like a local match or so. We're continuing to track those. Not all of them have active guidance at this time, and so I'll keep you posted on if there's anything. We've gotten a couple of programs that were sent to us, but the application date just didn't make sense. Keep watching them, and if there's anything else that comes up as well from your perspective, happy to work with the committee on that.
Okay,
It's not we've been at this for a couple of years in terms of local food, big believers in it. So it's not for lack of, well, I think we all agree it's really important to do. It's just a question of how do you do it all, right? And what are the best ways to try to, support efforts that we put out there. The last thing we want to do is kind of put a program out there that takes a certain amount of staff time and not be able to dedicate the time, and therefore we think kind of unravels, right? So
Is there any money dedicated to local food?
there isn't, yeah, I was just trying to go through it, and then I remember it was a total mess. Things are moving around from one budget to another, so just let it go. But there is money in general ops, ESE general ops, and then there's ELIT money, but that's really targeted more to access than it is to a local food economy.
it's 47.
I was saying 40, I think they remember correctly.
Yeah, the CFR.
Right, but so how much are we talking? Yes.
It could be another similar amount, I just have to, so I was going through, I think we had like 30 plus 10 plus, I thought there were a couple of lines in there. But I will follow up and I'll detail this.
Yeah, we can do that though.
Thank you. I mean, I would say it's everyone eats.
Yeah.
In this community that I know. And it is, it's probably at least $500 million in economic potential. Not that we can grow everything,
I think there's also been,
but
like, definitely on the food access side, other funding that some of the service providers have been able to provide to match like fresh food incentives. And so I think that's part of it that might not be well captured in this particular report, but is being covered by other organizations outside of the city.
but the report's excellent. It's very clear and moving along. I'm very impressed.
I just read a great article on vertical farms in, I forgot near what metropolitan area that was helping to provide lots of, standing it up, and you're also helping to provide a lot of work for persons with disability. And I thought, what a wonderful, synchronistic thing. So whenever Dave talks about local food, I always think, I wonder how, progressive city we are. I wonder if there's any way we could get more besides a farm that relies on the weather. What if we could do more, farming in some vertical farms or somewhere in a space that we can do it year round? Wow. I'd be up for that.
I think it was Detroit, was it Detroit?
Maybe it's,
Yeah,
maybe it's
I read that
Detroit.
about it.
Yeah, that's great.
Do you know if it was purely municipal or if it was with a partner nonprofit or something like that as well?
I think maybe Alex remembers, I think it was a partner, municipal partner with a nonprofit. Yeah.
Got it. I have a question about number of actions. I mean, it's true for a lot of them. It's not going to fall solely within one department's purview or something like that. So I just one example, I landed on in district scanning the the updates here was an action that's not been started yet, TL 1-F-2, so transportation and land use, or whatever that chapter is. Conduct a sidewalk and bike path quality assessment and master plan to identify needs to accelerate bike paths, building sidewalks, crosswalks, and other walking infrastructure in high priority areas serving vulnerable populations. And then also create an implementation plan to establishing annual increases in total miles of sidewalk, bike lanes, multi-use paths. So like we have some things currently that get at that, right? I think there was like this sidewalk assessment done by Public Works,
That
right?
is the light.
Got it.
LiDAR.
Plan,
Yeah,
right,
that LiDAR.
Yeah.
right, exactly. So like, how did, so, but the actions marked is not started, but like, we clearly have done things that like support it at some level. And we've also had some conversations in the context of the sidewalk committee and budgets and other things about like, and I've talked to Andrew Seaborn maybe twice or 3 times about this, like, how do we scope the comprehensively the nature of our like sidewalk challenges, like where obviously we're probably not going to add sidewalks to literally every street that doesn't have it, like that's why we have greenways, and like probably not every single street needs it, but like there are many that do. There's a maintenance, upkeep phase to that. It's a hard problem to wrap your head around, like it seems like we can fold into this as well.
Yeah.
So how, I guess my question is like, maybe you could use that example, action as an example of like, how are we thinking about existing assets, plans, things like that, folding into the action, and then also thinking about like these really, inherently multi-departmental approaches. Like, how is the climate action team and or your office like approaching coordination on that front, like assignment of tasks, how to establish like phasing, someone to take the lead, all that kind of stuff? It seems
Yeah, I think the ones that are difficult to break down are ones that like that, where it's actually kind of a couple of actions of one. But that's, I think, the benefit of having the climate action team and having departments represented on that is that there are aspects of that that are happening across the organization. And so I think maybe one example within transportation would be like taking the plan and turning it into a corridor study and taking that action and turning it into, okay, like here's what's phased out in terms of sidewalk increases for this year based on the pavement condition index. And so in some cases, there might be a study required. In other ones, if we're just going to try to continue to better track incremental progress because we have pieces of it happening across the organization. And so I think, things like bike lanes are being added in different contexts by different funding partners. So I think there's sort of an element of the climate action plan, which is continual reevaluation of whether the actions are appropriate. And in that case, maybe the scope of that particular action is too wide or not specific enough to what the city operations side of that is, but it needs to better communicate what we are currently doing.
So you could like update that action to say like leverage the city's LiDAR sidewalk study, like this, that, and the other to like synthesize this thing for a plan going forward.
Yeah. Well, and we are constantly creating new resources that may not be represented, or like the time that the cap was happening, there's been other subsequent funding that's happened where the timing might not line up anymore. We may have moved more quickly on some areas, like with the electric bus example, like we're moving more quickly on that because funding became available in that circumstance that could not have been anticipated when the cap was passed.
Yeah, thanks. And I guess to follow up with the climate action team's role in that, but the handful of those meetings that I guess I've been to so far have like mostly consisted of updates, I would say, from departments. Occasionally, a sort of organic conversation evolves around like an issue that is common to several departments, including off-road gas equipment, which we're going to talk about in just a minute here. But I haven't seen it used quite as much, I guess, in a structured way to like talk about like multi-departmental, like collaborative actions. Is there, I assume there's more work you're doing like outside that climate action team context to talk to department heads about what's falling under their purview, how to make progress, who we collaborate with on some of those multi-departmental ones. I
think it depends on the department. I'm working really closely with Parks right now on a LED lighting replacement for Twin Lakes, and that actually spans multiple divisions of their department in order to get that over the finish line. I think that will be maybe a good example or model of ways that we're gonna apply some of the ED lit funding for fleet electrification and building efficiency. So those will be two specific applications that I think climate action team will feed into, because we have multiple departments procuring vehicles and we need their feedback on that. And then in terms of like other specific things, I think there's a lot of elements of the CAP that are ongoing, and the role is to just support existing implementation and look for ways that we can help move that forward. And to use the like ED lit as another example, some of the green jobs funding that went towards the urban forestry program through Canopy Bloomington will be continued with the ED lit funding. So that's an external organization, but it supports our public tree canopy. So in areas where the city's not the appropriate lead implementation partner, we might be playing another role in supporting that or funding it.
Okay. Great, thanks.
I would also say, you know, that it's at times hard for people to wrap their brain around. But I feel like the value of the meeting, right? I mean, it's good, whatever content gets shared in the meeting, but the real value of the meeting is that it is a structural reminder to all departments who may or may not be walking around thinking sustainability all the time, that this is a critically important thing, that it takes coordination, and that, you know, they have resources available to them, and then you see that pay itself back sometimes with like departments you wouldn't expect, you know, kind of coming in and saying, I've got this idea for sustainability. You're like, good for you, like, where did this come from, right? And I'm not gonna name names, but I mean, sometimes, you know, there's certain departments you expect it from, and they're just so certain that you would maybe expect it less. But when that happens, then I think the seed is out there, right? People, and it's happening. People are taking kind of unilateral action. So we're trying to get away from command and control structure, and you know, and there's only one resource for all things sustainability. We're really trying to disseminate it. I think there is that value that's starting to happen. It's just and part of it's a climate action team, part of it's, you know, just, you know, administration focus, your focus on and stuff. But I do think it's taking hold, and so whatever the role of the climate action team in that, I think it's part of the solution.
I think there's also a lot of work happening at the program manager level. So like I've worked with program managers in different departments to talk about, okay, like how can we make it clear how to go through the COA process to get solar? And so that may be less evident at the full department level because we don't have enough time to get into those specific examples, but I think the work is happening across the organization.
I wanted to ask about the urban village centers that are mentioned in the SAP. And it's under the completed goals, it says establish an interdepartmental team to organize resources and expertise needed to establish urban village centers and identify 5 priority focus areas. So I haven't heard what those focus areas might be. What are they?
Yeah, so I mean, whether they're called like urban village centers or otherwise, the idea is to incentivize compact development. And so I think part of that has been being advanced for the affordable housing team and working and citing that in a way that creates more density in retail space. I think Hopewell will be another example of compact urban development. And so those are different areas across the community. And so the work's happening across a lot of different locations. I think the development around Switcher being one of them, Hopewell, just to speak with you.
So I think this is an idea that many in the community are very interested in. And it kind of came up when the video discussions of April and May of 2021. So if there are priority focus areas, I would like to know what they are and see how we can encourage that kind of contact.
Hang on a minute, I just turned volume down here.
Look, comment.
Wrong number.
So
Sure, yeah, I mean, I think we can
Something
give some
that-
examples too. We're taking notes as well, I think. put some written responses together as well.
If you know, just to follow up on that point, I think the most prominent regional example I've seen in the city, Cincinnati, has a bunch of village centers identified, and I think they've used this kind of like concentric circles, like walk shed approach, like 5, 10, 15-minute walk sheds, and actually having development standards like differ by those walk sheds. So like in the higher density, closer to the node, whatever it is. Sometimes it's a single section like hillside, and I understand it's a offsite example in Bloomington.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's a corridor of some kind. Do you know, have we like looked into that type of thing at all?
Like walk scores and.
Not just walk scores, but like the idea of like a walk shed, like a catchment area for what is, the change shifts a little bit for a node, for a village center.
I'm not sure in this instance. I know that we've like committed to trying to ensure that people are within like a walk shed for a park, but I'm not sure in terms of like urban development amenities.
I do think this is like an area of interest for the council, and yes, some folks in the community is making sure that, I don't know, we heard a lot about it. It is in our comprehensive plan, I think. As well.
Yeah, if you look at the comp plan, it's very briefly mentioned, and there is a picture of that particular intersection there as an existing example of that type of development that is being cited.
Yeah, probably like the oh gosh, what's the Renwick kind of area would be another thing. Well, we should probably wrap up this portion of the meeting and move on to the explorers, if that's okay with folks.
Is there any format change for tomorrow that you think would be helpful, or is the way that the morning is delivered?
I was a little surprised when you talked about increasing internal capacity, that you didn't mention the new staff position.
Sure. Yeah.
So maybe that.
Yeah, I can have that.
Yeah, we're all listed. Okay, we'll move on to this next item.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much. So I'm gonna kind of, I guess, lead discussion of this to start and then open it up. I'm gonna kind of go over a little bit of background, why this issue, talk about how to define the scope of what we're looking at and some issues for our consideration across that scope. Some suggestions for possible next steps, and then kind of open it for feedback and discussion. So as I think y'all know, we've discussed a little bit, one of the strategies, strategy TL1-I in the transportation and land use chapter, is to reduce citywide of the climate action plan, is to reduce citywide off-road equipment and lawn equipment annual emissions below 35,000 metric tons. And there's some details there about I guess the types of equipment: gas and diesel powered construction equipment, recreational equipment, and lawn equipment. Other co-benefits are identified and improved air quality, so lowering local air pollution, as well as reduced emissions. There's actually, I think, a typo in the original publication of the plan where one of the actions is repeated, but there's 3 actions under that strategy, and I'll just go ahead and read those so we're all grounded in the same, call from the plan. So the first first action is to introduce a policy to replace city off-road and lawn equipment with electric and low carbon fuel alternative options at the time of replacement, with traditional internal combustion engine as optional, requiring proof of need. Establish emission standards, testing and biofuel preference for any combustion vehicles remaining in the equipment fleet. Encourage county, school district, and Indiana University to develop and implement their own policies. So that's one action. The next is to develop an incentive program to convert fuel burning lawn equipment such as gas powered lawnmowers and blowers to electric. Coordinate with Duke Energy for support and identification of additional rebate programs to promote electric yard equipment. That's the second action. And the third one, establish a gas powered lawn equipment phase out ordinance, transitioning to lawn equipment powered by electricity, alternative clean fuels, and decrease noise pollution levels. In terms of phasing, the first action I read is phase 1, the next 2 are phase 2 actions. So that's what the climate action plan says. I'll also note that, as you all know, we've had Hugh Kramer and a few other folks come to council a few times over the last few years, highlighting, this issue and how it's a real burden, I think mostly from a noise pollution perspective, but probably a local air pollution perspective as well, in their immediate vicinity of their homes. Additionally, we discussed it at the last climate action team meeting, and the mayor was interested in this committee taking the lead on some public hearings to discuss, a transition to electric equipment. So that's part of the background as well. In terms of the overall scope, this is true of a lot of different types of emissions. We've got really two categories. We've got local government operations and we've got community scale emissions. So looking at the local government and the actions are related to both of those as well. In fact, that first action about a city policy is government operations. Additionally, any community scale regulations that we pass, we have to be able to comply ourselves. So that's an important consideration as we think about those types of policy options. So on the local government operations side, I know some of this work is underway with the departments in terms of cataloging equipment, and I think in most cases already, when possible, replacing with electric at time of replacement. But wondering if this committee would like to, be involved in facilitating a holistic look at that, with each department, I suppose, leading to a citywide inventory of all off-road equipment, categorized into logical categories like mowers or blowers and string trimmers, things like that, to look at number of units we have and their age, typical life cycle, cost, comparisons at time of replacement for traditional internal combustion engine, alternative fuels, or electric, and make sure that that's a life cycle look at cost, including maintenance operations, not just upfront capital. Noting any logistical barriers. So, when the use case is an all-day application of a particular equipment, it's probably going to require changing out batteries. Might be quite easy to do with blowers or string trimmers, harder to do with a riding lawnmower, for instance. And the cost competitiveness may vary there too. So I think looking at those factors, and then once you have that set of information, right, and we talked about this a little bit, Alex, you can start to talk about, okay, what's our phase out timeline if we just do time of replacement? Where does the technology still need to come along, or the market still need to come along for that to even be viable? Like, what type of premium are we willing to pay for, going electric at time of replacement? And then in some categories, maybe worst offenders for air and noise pollution, or most cost competitive, we can even consider early retirement of gas powered equipment. So that's kind of the universe of things to look at there that at least help us get to the point of understanding what a transition timeline is like for the city. What we want to invest in on that front. So once we get a holistic look at the problem, we can potentially legislate that. We've done that, with green building ordinance and other things like that. So that's a possible council action, doesn't necessarily have to be. And then finally, part of that action called from the climate action plan, I think is related to this one, is encouraging IU, Monroe County government, and MCCSC to also advance similar efforts. And I think, maybe as we wrap our heads around that problem, eventually some joint convenings, trying to get maybe a joint commitment for transition would be terrific. Possible that there's options for bulk buying that would benefit everybody, something like that. So that's my general view of the local government operations. Community side, I think it's a challenging problem. To invoke Alex's earlier comments about a carrot and stick approach, I think we can work to disincentivize gas powered equipment and incentivize electric in the near term. Do that programmatically. Possibly you could do some of that regulatorily through, in particular, Hugh has brought examples, and Kramer's brought examples of bans of types in other communities. Those tend to be seasonal or time of day based bans that maybe you can only use gas powered equipment in the sort of prime spring and fall seasons, and only 8 to 5, Monday through Saturday or something like that. So that's one possibility on the regulation side. We can also look to obviously educate and encourage transition to electric equipment. So we can explore rebate programs like Duke Energy, hardware stores, manufacturers. I think the education component could go a long way, especially because this is particularly harmful to outdoor workers. And figuring out what, at least getting an understanding from the people working in this field professionally, the commercial service providers, like how they're thinking about it, what would help them transition, identifying really all that suite of options before we can realistically talk about a complete phase out or, ban. Also the possibility of leveraging any federal funding opportunities, that come online for this. I think one additional thing I just wanted to note is that I was at so was Lauren, an Urban Sustainability Directors Network meeting in Indianapolis 2 weeks ago. And I was speaking with the sustainability director from Evanston, Illinois, which has a ban, a time limited ban of gas equipment, and apparently it's a bit of a nightmare to administer or to enforce, and it's kind of not ineffectual. It's not so there might be a big gap between what some of these bans say on the books in some of the cities where we have examples versus what's actually happening on the ground. And I think it would be worth our while to actually follow up with sustainability coordinators in those cities and or staff, to figure out is it working, how are you making it work? So that's something for as we explore those options. So again, those are the two major categories. My initial thoughts on how we can approach advancing those three climate action plan actions. And I think some next steps would be to set up some public hearings, convened by this committee in the coming 3 to 6 months. You really start as soon as folks want, and maybe we pursue a few meetings in each of those categories: local government operations, as well as community scale, and invite folks, residents at large, but certainly stakeholders who would be engaged in this in some way to attend, so that we can get a better understanding of how realistically we can transition. So yeah, that's my take of what we can do, and I think there are lots of other good ideas and input as well. So I'll stop there and just kind of open it for discussion from community members or staff.
If you would like to invite the Parks Climate Action Team that has looked into some pieces of their equipment and alternatives, I would be happy to connect with them and invite them to attend as well.
We have an inventory, like a preliminary list that we got from the government process, and I think it's parts.
Yeah.
We need to fill in the gaps of public works, and so I mean that internal works already and continue. I do agree. I have to say with your boys, sometimes it's hard to. I mean, it's nice to put a law in the books, but then the enforcement of that, you're like, oh my god, like what happens if someone decides to mow their lawn at 10 o'clock on a Saturday night? Like who's in charge of swooping in, and so I think we do have to be a little careful with implementation questions.
Could we, does it matter what device you're using? So Hugh is
Yes.
particularly concerned about leaf blowers, and I think that they have, certain ones operated at a certain pitch that literally drive him crazy, and I'm sure other people. And it, of course, creates a lot. I mean, by its nature, it's blows stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you're volatilizing, or you're suspending a lot of particles. So maybe we could look at devices differently. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But what's your feeling in terms of the mayor's commitments to this? Because as an administrator, he's going to have to allocate some personnel for enforcement. We can't do that to make it effective. And that may mean 7 days a week. We have, like, if we decide on quiet Sundays, for instance, I mean, maybe we should explore by having a single day of the week, someday when people can get peace and quiet for their mental health, at least during certain hours of the day. What, is the commitment there? I mean, I'm loath to have police, frankly.
Yeah, I mean,
They got their.
can you imagine?
Right. I mean, I would rather have a neighborhood resource officers go out, and most people are gonna say enough of this. Pick up the phone, call the city, and there's the line. You need somebody to go out and take it.
Yeah. I mean, look, I think really, I think his feeling, I think he's supportive of it. I think the feeling is we're not exactly sure what the right answer is, what, like, we don't want to have unforeseen consequences as a result of not having thought through it properly at the beginning. And so the idea behind airing out, having some hearings, having people in from industry, from the private, from residents and whatever, is just to try to capture, all right, what are we not thinking of? How do we structure this? What are the ones that we've looked a little bit already at around the country? So what's out there, but what's the one that makes the most sense for us here, and just have that out, right? And then we can make a judgment about what the right answer is. I don't know that we know right now, but what the answer should be here. And people have opinions, but their voices of 1 and 2 of the public, and they aren't necessarily representative of the public. So I think we just need to understand generally what would work.
So regarding this meeting coming up, so as you said, Matt, this concerns individuals, concerns lawn service companies and landscaping companies, it's city operations, it's campus. So we invite everyone, respective, put the word out, have people come, and then how would this manifest? How would we introduce the topic and come up with some possible steps forward that maybe points of agreement? We can all agree that maybe one day of a week, most people agree one, so that people can enjoy hearing birds instead of lawn equipment, or form a consensus in anything. Is that how to go forward, and then say, how do we get there?
Well, it seems to me that it's premature to say, okay, one day a week we're.
I'm just throwing it out there as a possibility, or doing away with two-stroke engines.
Take information.
Data
Yeah.
first.
But
Qualitative data
qualitative
from,
most people's opinions. But
well, but informed opinions.
That's that equipment is used. Placement cycle is, so, yard care business, what timetable are they on? Did they just buy a whole fleet of gas powered leaf blowers, what
What the
what
barriers
the
are.
alternatives are? And, get a good sense of the health risks in addition to cost, because that's a cost too. If their employees are getting sick.
And also what on the flip side, I think there's what the market's doing already to help us, right? And then even now versus 48 months ago or 24 months ago or whatever, that the availability of relatively cost-effective equipment, I think is making individuals transition on their own. I anecdotally had a neighbor who, just one day showed up with a new electric mower. I'm like, what's that about, right? He had these big Pascal's new mowers. It's like it was just a better option. Right, so all right, good for you. So I think getting a sense of what the market is like also be interesting, perhaps, to include on the list Lowe's or kind of hardware store kind of retailer insights, maybe.
talk about carrots and sticks. We incentivize this.
No, if it would help.
I think in terms of city operations, that's what we're looking at for next year, not just with lawn mowing equipment, but vehicles, is that there's kind of a purchase premium on some of this equipment right now, so trying to cover the difference there so that we can actually purchase things like the electric mower with anticipation that it's gonna last much longer and that the total cost of ownership can be calculated more on the front end. So I think that's true with consumers as well as maybe looking at opportunities for some communities have done their air quality rebates programs and things like those. I think there's a lot of things on the table.
My feeling was that it might be useful to separate these two categories of issues in terms of hearings. That the way that the city of Bloomington might make decisions about this is kind of fundamentally different than the way a lawn care, company or resident might think about it. How we would go about accelerating the transition seems different enough in terms of the policy tools at hand that maybe they should be pursued differently. But I'm not married to that necessarily. I mean, you sort of suggested bring everybody together today, which is not, there's benefits to that probably too.
Yeah, the tracks, the practical applications probably have to be two ways, but maybe an initial meeting could be everybody and get everybody's input. But I think it's going to have to be government, and then the community is going to have to be a different track, because the tools we can mandate. City of Bloomington, we're going to all change to electric, and as the replacement, but you can't really tell the public that. It's really not going to. People won't be happy and it won't work.
It seems to me that following Devitt during her presentation recently. To already that they're going a long way in terms of phasing this stuff out. So
And there's
quite a way.
$250,000 in ED-lit for electric.
Well, yeah, I think that they've done quite a bit as well, so they could go through inventory in that place too. In order for
One of the things also that popped up in my head when you mentioned Hugh Kramer was years ago, I bought an electric lawn blower. One of those electric ones. It's as loud as a gas one. It sounds like a tornado. And I'm sure my neighbor thinks, what is that guy doing? It's electric. And it's not quiet at all. And I kind of thought I'd buy it because it would be better for the environment and all, but it's really crazy and loud. So I don't know what, if we incentivize somebody to buy electric for the pollution aspect of it, it may not be much quieter unless there's been advances in the last 3-4 years that really.
Hugh Kramer has the data. He does.
Yeah.
He does. He knows certain models that have
Okay.
a certain pitch that doesn't irritate or they're lower frequency sound or cause less noise. But, I mean, to me, subsidized brakes, give people a rake here. Get exercise.
What about
That would be
rebates?
fine.
Have we scoped that at all? Have we had that conversation with any Arctic energy contacts? By our, I mean your energy contacts.
But I could have a conversation with Liz next week about our GHG inventory, and see if they have anything that they're doing in different areas of
Sure.
their service territory.
Yeah, that'd be great. So if we look into that, so it should be part of the conversation there.
They're just
Looking
rolled
for
up.
what? I didn't-
Oh, rebates. So obviously the city could create a program, where we help subsidize a transition or a trade-in program or something, but like better to use other funds for that if possible.
Oh, sorry. Well, I was just gonna say, they have new programs for like electric vehicle chargers, so it's possible that they might have as part of their right case thing.
The timeline on getting the information about city operations. Can we set that for the end of the year?
We have a meeting coming up for the climate, when was it, the 18th, I think. We have to do a little work. So we have these chunks of money, right? We need to kind of drill down and say, okay, we've got this chunk, in this case, the electrification one. So we're gonna kind of lay that out in November, and then we have a follow-up meeting in early January, once the money's actually become available. So I think between those two, we should be able to sort of solve, this is how 2023 is going to be expended against the different possible electrification efforts. So parks, equipment, vehicles, public work equipment, we just have to create a shopping list. And hopefully the next 90 days or so should be enough time to really figure that out. We already have parks pretty well figured out.
Yeah,
We'll just have gaps.
I'm also meeting with Parks next week, so then like an idea of what they've already electrified on hand.
Yeah, I mean, the first point would just be to understand how much of this equipment it has.
Yeah,
Is already like,
yeah, I can ask them.
or how much
How much-
total is total.
What is
Yeah.
total into gas?
Is it, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
And then you say, so by January, we would have a plan.
It would be good to, yeah, I don't know if that's too aggressive, but I think we
I mean, we don't have enough money enough to, it's gonna have to be phased, so I think it's just a matter of figuring out what the giant priority and how we can how to like measure impact, because it's across different types of equipment, so. Electric lower demo, they had an idea of like CO2 reduction associated with that compared to a conventional mower, but I think that's true across all different types of equipment is needing to have consistent measurement there.
Is the inventory itself, does it span more than parks and public works, or are those the?
I think utilities might have some.
Oh, yeah, of course.
And then I'm not sure there's really materially any other department that has.
So that's most of it.
That is-
Yeah, it's public works and covered street and.
Mhm.
TAN might have a little, but right, because they go and chop away at the sidewalk.
Yeah, I don't think it's.
Back to what you were saying before, though, so you're talking about whether landscape companies and city should be sort of looked at differently. I think they obviously, you're right, I mean, there are tools to affect both of those groups. I think there might be value in also having them together in the way that they're both business operations, right? And they both struggle with the same challenge. And actually, I think it might be kind of helpful for the landscapers to realize that the same problems exist, you know, that we're struggling with the same thing. Like there's limited costs or limited funds, got to make tough choices. And so it might kind of remove the barrier a little bit between, you know, on the outside feeling like things are being imposed on them or whatever, when the inside's having the same challenge, right?
You need to have the city staff meet with
Well,
lawn care. people.
we're just in the same meeting, right? Not dealing, even though absolutely the tools are different to be able to affect them. Problems are sort of the same, and it might be helpful that everybody understands the problems.
Cross pollination is always good.
Yeah. I just, you know, a little sympathy between the.
That sounds good to me. I'm happy to do it for our first meeting, kind of start to get folks have it inclusive of city government. We can potentially invite folks from IU, landscaping, whatever that is, and CCSC and county if they want, you know, to come potentially.
Yeah, we should try to phrase it. In like common goal.
We're taking
is
your
to do
toys.
better by this
Right, that's right.
is the common goal. Do better by the environment. Large sense and other narrows. Yeah. Let's have a discussion and see. Not that you can start this way, but I just want to avoid saying. We're thinking of banning your.
Yeah. I think it's about facilitating a transition to low emissions, healthier implement, you know.
Yeah,
Okay.
I would even go broader and say this is for human health.
Yeah.
You know, because some people are going to argue about emissions, but what
Yeah.
matters.
For humans and.
In terms of the city operations, and looking at like our inventory list, like, would you all be willing to like share what we have so far, or like maybe a month down the line or something? Like I know you all have your own processes for like decision making with respect to 2023, you know, expenditures and then going forward. But I think in terms like my interest as a councilperson and as a member of this committee, like more so is getting like making sure that we're getting a completely comprehensive look at the whole picture of equipment, what the different considerations are, like what the logical categories are again, and kind of what are the, you know, decision points for each. So yeah, I don't know.
I think we can, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't think there's no reason not to share it. The problem is we don't have direct access to it all the time, so we have to go. You know,
Yeah, I mean, I can ask parks and at the very minimum, we can start with what they currently replaced and what they've requested or are looking to replace and then go from there.
Sounds great. Yeah, I think once I see like what data you all are tracking now, like I'll have a much clearer picture of like if I have additional questions or like what, you know, what else we might like to know. But
Gotta start somewhere, right?
yeah.
Right.
What do folks think in terms of timelines for getting this process started? I imagine this first meeting, we'll just schedule the first meeting to kind of see how it goes and what issues emerge and what next steps will look like, what people's interest is, but I assume it will be the first of a number of meetings.
Could you get something done? Could we get something like that would be acceptable to people before the holidays? You know, because we're entering holiday season, that always puts a crimp in a lot of things. So I don't know, I just asked it out loud.
Yeah.
It might be a little bit difficult to, I was thinking actually in the new year, looking forward to that. And certainly a lot of the lawn care businesses aren't going to be operating, they should have time on their hands.
Right.
Less busy. I don't know, I think we've got a pretty schedule from here. The next, you know, holidays coming up.
You might also want to think about like potential implementation schedules and work back from that, right? So, you know, under maybe even some of the questions we talked about is when you make purchase decisions, right? So do landscape companies do their equipment replacement after the end of the season or before the season, right? I know that probably retailers would say that residents are buying new lawnmowers, you know, in March, not November, right? And so I would assume that that's probably pretty good. Well, I have no sense of the other thing. So then the question is, all right, whatever it is that gets rolled out with whatever timing, you know, work backwards from that, and that might also help dictate the sequence of moves.
Yeah, I have no idea, but maybe businesses would buy it off season because the prices are really cheaper. So buy it in December, January, just buying one equipment then. I don't know.
Christmas gifts.
Well, that's- I always get one. Yeah.
I'm a little torn on, when to do it next. I know we're getting a little crowded. I mean, I'd be open to, I also want to kind of avoid Thanksgiving week specifically. We can consider, the week after, it's probably mostly beyond the peak hours or weeks for long-term companies. I'm also fine waiting until like mid to late January. I think folks prefer that out.
Just a question, would that give staff time? I know we were talking about a 90-day timeline for the data that we're collecting for the internal equipment. Is that,
I don't know. I mean, I don't see those two as necessarily being.
I'm just saying that helps inform, city side what the challenges are to some of the challenges. Would that information be helpful to have going into this meeting?
Yeah, I think the work could happen concurrently too. There's been some policies that have been gathered as well, so maybe one meeting could be reviewing other city or community examples of policies. And then also looking at our existing efforts and then subsequently having more of the public hearings in June.
You're suggesting, sorry, when would we do that and who would be involved in the review
Well, just having a follow-up conversation with this before the end of the year,
for this group?
but yeah, but
Yeah.
not planning a public hearing until next year.
Got it. Yeah, we can do
Yeah,
that.
that sounds good. Because before we have the public meeting, I would like to have more information about costs and what the health impacts are and all this stuff. So that I have that in my mind while we talk to people in the industry.
Are you thinking of another meeting for this group before the end of the year?
That's what it sounds like.
Yeah, so I think it might be useful to invite Pete Kramer for at least a
Sure.
short period of time, because he's just a wealth of information. And state and local regulations and things like this. It's amazing what he's doing.
Do we want to pick a date? This sort of Tuesday evening time is something we could scope early in the year. The third Tuesday of November is the 15th. That is the week before Thanksgiving week.
That works for me.
I moved to be close to that day because
Oh, did you?
it's a election day.
Okay, good point. Well, we could do the 29th of November, after Thanksgiving, or even the first week of December and 6th. Either of those are okay with me.
Yeah, I'm open. Either one of those.
What in it works best for me.
Yeah. Is that okay with?
Okay.
Isabel?
I think so. 29. Wait. Okay.
And Jesse, former
Yep.
SPIA service corps.
Yep.
Fellow with us had done some research around this too, which you mind circulating that, Stephen?
No, I don't mind. Our current folks have also kind of carried that forward and looked at even more communities. I don't know, we've gathered up all of the specific items of legislation, but we've started doing that, and we can pick that up if that's helpful. We've got a list of 50 or more communities that have some form of restriction, regulation, so they vary, but we'll pick that up and share that.
Okay,
with all
great.
of you.
Is it worth trying to reach out to any of them before that meeting, or would we rather discuss the policy options first that might better target our outreach? First. Okay. Sounds good. All right, so,
The 29th.
yep,
Do we care what room? I'm gonna just go ahead and schedule this now. It looks like we've got our pick. Do we like this room? The Kloski, I think maybe better for sound, but
And people finding.
and it's downstairs, so
okay,
Kloski. 6 o'clock on the 29th.
Sure.
all right, any rapid thoughts on, the electrification of off-road equipment? If you have thoughts, I guess, following up from this conversation, things you want to tackle at that meeting or resources to share with folks about health impacts or whatever else, feel free, of course. And then, yeah, getting close to the end of our meeting time, were there any other committee member issues or priorities that y'all wanted to bring up?
I wanted to provide an update on a topic that came up, I think back in March, that Isabel mentioned on multifamily recycling. I've got a meeting, I believe, with one of your interest. Next Tuesday, and Isabel, I should have thought to maybe invite you, but Kendra reached out to ask what research we've done on that, and I don't know if that's something you all are also looking at. And
I know there had been some like council research in the past, and just wanted to make sure that we had looked at the schedule that was for.
So I'm going to provide, I think, the information that we have on that topic to Ben and see where that goes. But I've lost track of that. It's still an issue I know that you're interested in. So
this is for ESD.
Well, we have a little bit of funding for multifamily recycling. Like not a full implementation, but some sort of incentive. And so we've been calling other communities, talking to the recycling partnership about their programs with multifamily units. My intern has been trying to get an assessment of what percentage of apartment managers offer recycling at all right now. And then wanted to look at any like legal barriers, longer term, and so it'll be something limited for next year, but we have a little bit of funding, trying to figure out what the best use of that will be.
sorry if that was premature, but
No,
I was just looking at my notes from the last time this committee met and happened to be meeting with Kendra next week. So
I'll mention a few things just that I met with council staff yesterday to discuss probably 6 or 7 different legislative things on my mind. Will progress at varying speeds. I'm sure they all most of them have a climate nexus of some kind. I'm not sure if it makes sense to bring some of them through this body ultimately in some way or another, but I want to at least mention them. A couple involve ways to accelerate progress on the transportation plan and or with sidewalks, as well as looking at safety of our streets, especially related to the striped bike lanes. So there's a few things I was exploring with staff on that front. Also wanting to look at some Title 20 things over time, considering what aspects of the Hopewell site overlay development might be useful in application elsewhere. I think it's worth revisiting parking minimums at some point. There's a lot of good information coming out from other communities that are working to eliminate and help not mandate excess parking anyway. Another trend I've seen is folks working to limit the sites where new gas stations can go, knowing that A, we're transitioning away from gas stations, B, they often end up as brownfields. There's kind of no shortage of current brownfields where we can put anyone who wants to have a gas station. I'm not sure, I'm not aware of any in Indiana. I've seen it elsewhere. It's been done. I think it's worth looking into. Also want to look at ways to look at as an alternative to accessory dwelling units, the possibility of subdivision of lots for actually a separate lot of record and a separate home. That was something Mark Barnett and I discussed almost 4 years ago now when I was campaigning for office. He was like, can we just make the city subdivide every corner lot in the city? I was like, well, no, the city can't make anybody subdivide anything. But we could allow it, the idea being that you've got street frontage. It's kind of the historic development pattern. You've got a lot of smaller lot sizes, that did have that. Smaller lots where you've got street frontage, and I think it's worth us looking into what's kind of currently prohibited by code. So I've talked to staff a few times about that and wanting to progress that. Those are the main ones, I think. So anyway, if any of those spark interest and you want to be involved, let me know. But thought I'd bring them up since they all have climate dimension. Anything else, folks? Dave?
Yeah, I think this is a climate dimension, a big one. I would like a feasibility study on reopening our landfill. Because it just seems to me that it's just an enormous expenditure, it's going to be growing. It's increasing. To farm out our waste to the Republic, to take the Terre Haute or wherever it is. And it seems to me that we could reopen that landfill. It would take coordination with the county. It would be great if it were married with the MRF. So we could sort materials.
Yeah.
And, you know, that would be a way to intercept organics before going into the landfill, reducing methane. But I think it would be a cost savings if we were to do it. And I'd just like to know, I mean, that's my feeling. But if we had a feasibility study that would actually say, over 10 years, we could save X amount with this amount of investment. Maybe we convince people to do it.
Have you talked to Tom Glasson about it?
Not lately. No,
We'll check with him first.
not.
There may be legal reasons or other reasons.
I think
that
we're-
it's not feasible.
We were prohibited for 20 years, I think, and that's expired now. Since our landfill caught fire.
Okay,
2003. The rear Steve Owens story, he just appointed the solid waste board, gets a call, landfill's on fire, he's like, what do I do? Bring it up. Okay. But they all,
That's what shut
bucket
it down.
brigade, right?
That's what shut it down, and then it was prohibited from reopening.
Yeah, it was not well managed. I think we could do a better job, but, you know, we ought to internalize these things and not just spew it to Terre Haute or wherever. Anyway. So that's my major point for tonight.
Sounds good. All right, thanks, everyone.
Okay, okay.
No objections, we adjourn.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Matt.
Yeah.
Yep.
Good meeting. Thanks, Lauren.
yeah, of course.